Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. As we always do, we're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. Friends, you know I'm a California girl, born and raised. I love this state for many reasons and for good reasons. California's stunning, the most beautiful state in the country. Try to prove me wrong. It feeds the world. It's a global tech hub, has a massive economy, is home to the entertainment industry. It's ethnically and culturally diverse. And we also are fraught with terrible problems. Homelessness, unsustainable cost of living, restrictions on top of regulations on top of restrictions, progressive, ideologically infected, and lowest of the low performing schools, out of control crime, a housing crisis, drought, water issues, and some of the highest taxes in the country. It's no wonder good, hardworking people are fleeing with their families for greener pastures. But can California be saved through strong, transparent, honest leadership and good policy that's meant to better the lives of citizens? We're going to find out together because I've got on the show today the man who can give us the answer to that burning question. Greg Burt is the VP of the California Family Council, acting as a watchdog over the state legislature on the issues related to religious liberty, parental rights, the value of human life from conception to natural death, and the biblical definition of family and gender. A communications, media, and government policy specialist with over 29 years of experience in public relations, marketing, journalism, public affairs, grassroots activism, and legislative advocacy. He's worked as an award-winning investigative reporter, run congressional offices in Colorado for a member of Congress, worked for a California senator as a constituent advocate in Orange County, and as a press secretary at the state capitol for a member of the California Assembly. Greg, thanks so much for coming on Politically Basic today.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
That's quite a bio, sir. You've had your hands in politics and legislation for a long time, and I am so excited that we just get to focus on California and what's going on here on this episode today. You know, as we say, what happens in California, you can expect that might be coming to a state near you soon. So we're definitely in a bellwether when it comes to this.
Right.
But let's just kick it off with, why don't you tell my audience what the California Family Council is and what's the work that's going on there all about?
Yeah, well, the California Family Council is one of 40 state policy councils. We're all kind of united together, and we are Christian organizations that are usually based in state capitals, and we are advocating for life, family, and liberty from a Christian perspective. And so I have an office right across the street from the Capitol. Right now, I'm sitting in the studio and look out the window, and you can see the state capitol there. And I've been up here since 2014, so a little over 10 years. And I have a background in journalism and public policy. You know, you read the bio, so I've kind of done all kinds of stuff. And I get to do journalism and public policy all wrapped in one on the issues that I'm very concerned about here in California. Parental rights is under attack, and as we talk today and go over some of these bills, the legislature is really trying to revolutionize the way we all think about sex and gender and family, and all those things are under attack, and they're using the education system, and they're using laws, licensing. The pressure is on almost everyone in the state to adhere to their view of things, and if you don't, they're eager to punish you. So, but that would violate the U.S. Constitution, so thank goodness we still have that. The First Amendment protects a lot of our rights, and so, but you got to stand up for them, or they will be taken from you. And so, a lot of what happens at the state capitol is kind of confusing for folks. Everybody pays attention to federal politics, but it's your local government, your state government, that has a bigger impact on your life than what's happening federally. Yet, you know, most people don't know who their state senator is or their state representative is. So that's part of my job, is to keep people aware of what's happening and to speak up. These are your representatives, and they are supposed to be representing your values, but a lot of times they they go along with their work without many people watching what they're up to until, it comes in your front door and then you say, how did this happen? Right. So my goal is to get you to do something before it turns up at your front door.
Well, I like the sound of that, and that's why we call you guys a watchdog, and we sure appreciate it. And I'm glad that you're right there. I know you guys are advocating and working in the Capitol and around the Capitol all the time, and you're also getting a front row seat to this $1.6 billion use of our taxpayer dollars to, I don't know, renovate the Capitol. What's happening over there? Are they putting gold bars in the flooring? What's the deal?
Right. Well, next to we have a Capitol that's been there since, the mid 1800s. So that was revamped back in the 70s, but attached to it was a big office building that was built in the 1950s, called it the Annex. It was kind of like it wasn't particularly beautiful. Felt like more like a hospital. And so that's the building I worked in. And it was old and a lot full of asbestos and didn't comply with, ADA, handicap, rules, and so they knew they had to either get rid of it or revamp it. They decided to get rid of it. They tore the whole thing down, and now they're building a brand new, billion plus building. And I've been watching it go up, and they're just starting to put the glass on the outside, and so eventually they're going to have a brand new building. But why is it costing so much? Well, I don't know. We heard that. They were getting some of the marble from Italy, and so who knows?
As one does when you're revamping a state building next to the Capitol. That makes perfect sense. Well, what does make sense is that it sounds like the building needed to be either significantly renovated or rebuilt. So we're fine with that. The taxpayers are fine with an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars. We're certainly not fine with $1.5 billion going into some building, but we'll come check it out and see how it's going. So you're right. California state politics can be overwhelming. It does seem like in our state particularly, Greg, that there is something wild happening every day or multiple things happening every day, and it's really hard to keep up. So I'm glad we're talking because we're going to keep it basics only today. And why don't we start off by talking about how California politics work, just very generally. Is it different from other states, or do we operate pretty much along the same lines of operation that most other states in the nation do?
Well, I guess what's unique about California is that we are a huge state, so we got almost 40 million people. And we have 80 members of the Assembly and 40 members of the Senate. And so you think about it, 40 members, you got one senator represents about 1 million people. And you think about a member of Congress represents about 600,000. Mm-hmm. So that's one dynamic. And so they also have to know that the legislature is dominated by one party. I think during the election for the president, I think it was, the conservative Republican, Trump, I think he got around almost 40% of the vote, right, to 60%. And so you would think, well, 40% of the legislature should be, Republican and 60% should be Democrat. Well, no, it's more like 2/3, like 1/4 is Republican, and 3/4 is Democrat. So in the Assembly, we have about 20 Republicans and 60 Democrats. And in the Senate, I think we have 9 or 10 Republicans out of the 40. So it's really dominated by one party up here. And so that has its issues. Bills, they can pretty much do what they want. Right, and they don't have to listen to Republicans much at all. So that's a dynamic. What do you do when you're that much of a minority? Well, you need to learn to be effective, and really, you need to learn an effective watchdog on what the majority is doing. And so there's things you can do, we're always trying to encourage Republicans to not give up their values and continue to advocate for the social issues. Now, Republicans, tend to, especially in our state, tend to shy away from social issues. I think their consultants tell them those are issues that are never going to get uh, get more votes, and so we're in the position of sometimes making sure that our Republican allies don't abandon the very things that we're advocating
Hmm.
for. So that's I'm not sure if there's any other questions.
No,
It
it's good
typically
for people to
there's two
understand that.
houses, and you
Hmm.
have to just like the Congress, a bill starts in either house, and they have to go through
Hmm.
committee hearings, and then they flip sides, and they have to go through. There's some public hearings every time a bill goes through, right? And then ultimately the governor will decide whether he signs or vetoes the bill. No, I mean we haven't. You can override a veto technically, but it's never been done since I think Brown's first administration. So.
Well, that's been a minute. No, I'm glad that
Right,
we're
right.
talking about this, and we're going to jump into some of these bills that have just gone to Governor Newsom, and he has signed them into law because
Right.
some of them give us the opportunity to talk about that process that's important. But I'm glad that you're mentioning the dichotomy of representation because we're going to get to Prop 50, but also that this has been a growing issue amongst voters and a lot of Republicans, of course, in the state of California, because when you're talking about 15, 16 million people being represented with less than 25%. Now I've heard 17% representation right now, and that's at risk of going even lower. That's concerning, and that does not fall in line with what the safeguards of a republic were intended to do. And so we're going to get to all of that, but also important to note that our legislature is a full-time legislature and not a part-time one,
That's
which
right.
I happen to think is why they crank out so much of this legislation, much of which personally, Greg, I just really don't think that we need. So they're keeping themselves quite busy. So let's talk about some of it. Let's talk about the hot topic bill du jour, and that was AB 495. Wow. This
Right.
one was highly concerning. It did pass, but with some amendments. And so maybe you can give us a quick overview of what AB 495 was intended to do and what those amendments to it were.
Well, what was it intended to do? Well, the when you pass a bill up here, you almost sometimes feel like it's a used car salesman trying to sell you something that you're not quite exactly sure what you're getting. So they always tell you their intent is always for helping and for not undermining any of your rights. So the bill was sold as trying to solve the issue of what happens if someone is picked up by ICE for being here illegally and the children are left alone. And who is going to take care of them? And so a bill was supposed to address that.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, we didn't have a problem with the bill. Well, it's only because we didn't quite understand the very end of Section 5, where it was talking about something we had never heard of before called the Caregiver Authorization Affidavit. It's a form that's been around for a while, and they were trying to make sure that medical facilities and schools were listening to its authority. And we thought, what the heck is this form? And as some attorneys started explaining to me how the form works, it is a form you can print off the internet, and I got a copy it right here. This is just right out of the text of the bill. And what it does is it has 8 questions on here, and it gives you certain authority based on what questions you ask to make decisions for a child, either education decisions or medical decisions. If for questions 1 through 4, anyone who's over 18 simply claims they have a minor living with them, and if you have the name of the minor's birth date, you write down your name and you write down your home address and you sign it. That gives you authority to make education decisions, where a kid goes to school, where to unenroll them. Anyone can fill out this form without the parent signing it or even knowing it's being signed, and you can enroll a child in a school, right? And if you fill out the additional, which is 5 through 8, you have to claim that you're some type of relative, up to a fifth degree of kinship, which is like, I think for me, we'd be like my second cousins on either side. Like, I don't even know who my second cousins are. This is my mom's cousins' kids, right? If they fill out the form and they say, "Hey, I haven't got a hold of the parents. I put my birth date." You write an ID number. You don't have to show your ID. Just write some kind of ID number down, and you sign it. Then you can have that form, and you can have a child. You can go to the doctor or the hospital or anything else and make all medical decisions for that particular child without the parent knowing. So this form, as it exists currently, violates parental rights. Now, it doesn't remove custody from the parent, but it lets somebody else have the same decision-making authority as the parent. So it completely undermines your rights. I mean, what's the point of having parental rights if various people can fill out a form and make the same decisions only you should be able to make, right? And so what we believe was happening is there were too many medical facilities and educational facilities who would not accept this form because the parent hadn't signed it. And so initially, they put on the form 3 different times that a parent doesn't have to sign this, right? And then it also said, for making medical decisions, you don't have to be you can be a relative, but you can also just claim to be the child's mentor, right? Hey, I'm the child's mentor. The neighbor nobody has to verify it. There's no verification necessary. You don't have to get the form notarized. So there's no oversight. And then the form exempts the healthcare provider in the school from being held liable if you end up handing the child over to somebody who does them harm. So this scared us to death. It's like this is every parent's nightmare. And so we had a huge rally that we organized with other pro-parental rights groups. Thousands of people showed up. We did tons of lobbying. They eventually amended out 2 parts. They took out the section where it said 3 different times that parents don't have to sign it. Now, parents don't have to sign it, but they took out that language, right? And then they did add in here, you don't have to have the form notarized, right? That was an addition. And then they took out the part where it talked about a mentor. So now we're back to a relative to the fifth degree of kinship is still on there. So, yeah. So, and get this. So the governor, when he comes out signing this particular bill, he put out a press release, and he said that the new law was to safeguard parental rights.
How? By removing rights from parents?
Right.
Let me everything coming out of that, that is just a 180.
The ignorant, it just completely ignored the form. This form right here does not need a parent signing it. So explain to me how that helps the parent. Now, it may be, so he's probably saying, well, this form's been around forever. Yeah, but you just confirmed its authority. You altered it, giving it more authority, right? So this form is now yours, and you signed it. So don't give us that you're helping out with parental rights. The other parts of the bill might have done that, and we didn't object to those. So it's playing upon people's ignorance. It's playing upon hoping the press doesn't actually read the bill. And this is the problem I have with the press. Most of the time, they don't take the time to read the bills themselves. They don't, who am I to explain what a bill means? I'm just going to ask the author what the bill means. And so that's what they do. They go to the author and says, what's this bill supposed to do? And the author goes, well, it's supposed to protect parental rights and provide a place for immigrant children to go in case their parents get whisked away by ICE, right? And then they ignore, and then say, well, what if they don't read the bill, they don't look at, and then they interview us, and we complained about the bill, and then they put those two things out there, and the public remains confused. Like, well, I don't know what to believe.
Right, right. Well, this one was confusing. Let me ask you, there was confusion, and I admit to being personally confused over this, that this did have to do with temporary custody. Does it only have to do with medical and educational decisions, or would it allow someone to assume temporary custody of a minor also?
Well, so here is, we're talking with legal language. Like, who has legal custody? Well, the parent has legal custody, right? So technically this form isn't giving them legal custody, but it lets them act as though they have custody. See the wordplay?
Sure, sure.
So, and this is where some of the people on our side, we're saying it's giving over custody to a stranger. Well, they should have said it's giving over custody-like care.
Okay.
To a stranger.
That's helpful. Here's let me ask
right?
you this. Yes, I understand now. Thanks for explaining that. In a scenario that would have happened before AB 495 was made law,
Right.
if someone was being processed for deportation, there was already a caregiver authorization form or a process set up that did include a lot of vetting, right? A court seal was required, an ID, personal information for the person who was going to assume custody or temporary custody while the parent or parents or guardian was going through that process of deportation. I have that right, yes? We already had a system set in place for that.
Yeah, it's called CPS.
Yeah.
Right? If a child is left abandoned, you call the police, and the police call Child Protective Services, and then the court gets involved, and the child is placed either with a relative. The court will oversee the placement of the child. Mm-hmm. And if there's nobody to place them with, then they put them in foster care.
Right.
That's how the system works. If for any reason the parent can't be found.
Well, then let me ask you this, Greg. I really want to get to the heart of this.
Good.
Again, before AB 495, should someone else other than the parent or legal guardian need to make medical or educational decisions? I would love an example of that. And then also, wasn't the caregiver authorization affidavit already in existence? I guess what I'm getting at is why do we have to have AB 495, which still gives the same authority, the temporary authority that we had before AB 495 existed, yet it removes the vetting process?
What really what AB 495 did was they did a couple updates to the form. So, but our argument is fundamentally with the form, whether we would be talking about this with or without AB 495, right? We did not know this existed. Mm-hmm. Neither did all of our attorneys. And when they read it, they could not believe it, that this existed. No, we are looking through other states. No other state has a caregiver authorization affidavit like this for giving someone else temporary rights without having the parent involved.
Why do you need it? When would this be a necessary action to take?
I think what is happening is there are lots of... remember how many kids came into the country over the last several years without their parents? And there are a lot of kids living with relatives or friends, and their parents are in a different country. Mm-hmm. And their parents are nowhere to be found, right? So we have a lot of unaccompanied minors living out there in our community, and they're trying to figure out how are we going to get these kids in school? How are we going to get them to... and they also don't want... Involving the courts is long and arduous, right? And so they wanted a quick way to avoid having to call CPS. They didn't want to have to deal with the government, right? And if let's say there's a scenario where somebody is temporarily taken by ICE, the parent goes away, and then if the court got involved, they would probably give temporary custody to somebody else, right? And then the parent comes back and then has to go through the process of getting their kids back. And they wanted to avoid that, which I could totally understand that. Hey, we can see the need for something like this as long as parents are involved.
Or there's some kind of vetting. There's any kind
Yes,
of
some
vetting
kind
going
of
on. And
vetting.
now
Like
there's zero.
either the parents do the vetting or you get courts involved.
This isn't safe for children, unaccompanied minors. If the
No.
intention is to get them the medical care and educational decisions made quickly without having to go through the very slow process of a court system, this doesn't necessarily accomplish that. And it also opens the door, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, for someone who is ill-intended to just claim that they are a relation, claim that they are a mentor or not. That doesn't, that's not part of it anymore. Claim that they are there to assume these rights and responsibilities of a parent or legal guardian, and then do something really frightening once they do have the child under their care within that context.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about probably next is, California has established itself as a sanctuary for kids who want to transition medically.
Right.
Right. And so, what that means is there was a bill passed a couple years ago that says if somebody else, other than the parents, somebody else from another state, can bring a minor to California, and if they bring a minor to California because they can't get medical transitioning services, meaning puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, or double mastectomies on young girls. If they can't get that in Kentucky or Tennessee, anyone can bring them to California, and California's courts will give that person temporary custody of the child. And then once they're here in California, all they got to do is fill out one of these forms.
No, it's scary.
And get the kid top surgery, which they call it. And so we fear this could be used by anyone bringing a kid, from another state against the parent's wishes to get them medical care. And you think about vaccinations, you think about other things that parents would want particular involvement in, that the government might disagree with you on. All you got to do is have an activist teacher, or
sure.
a relative.
And even the state of California is making that more accessible. So let's play a little legislation hopscotch really quick, okay? We got AB 727. You're well versed. You just wrote all about it. This is making all schools promote the Trevor Project hotline, which includes very adult-themed chat rooms where a minor, can connect and chat with an adult who might be promoting things like transitioning or getting on certain medications. All right, then we hop right on over to AB 1084. This lets a minor change their sex marker on a birth certificate. Here we go. We're still playing the game. No problem. Right. Okay, SB 59 is going to seal that court record, right?
Right.
So even if a parent finds out about it, they can't do anything about this. And it criminalizes people who do try to expose it and change it. And then we hop right back on over to AB 495. And that minor can get linked up with an adult who says, don't worry, you can't get this done where you are. I've got you. Let me fill out this form and say that I'm this and that this is all good. And then they're just gone. I feel like this legislation that has been passed and signed into law in California is just an interwoven network that allows people to hop around and use these different things, use these different now open doors to help take/abuse minors.
Right. And another big thing we've been finding is that, kids are being secretly transitioned at school without their parents' knowledge. So, it doesn't matter the age. The state government here, the Attorney General, has been arguing that kids have privacy rights from their own parents. And one of those privacy rights is the right to decide what gender they are, right? And so if they decide at school they want to be a different gender, it doesn't have to be just the opposite sex, it could be any gender, and they're all, all these made-up genders, and they could change their name and their pronoun, and then the schools were telling teachers, okay, Now, this has a privacy right. You are not allowed to let the parent know that the child has changed their pronouns or their name. And so when you talk to them, on the phone or via email, or you meet them at a teacher-parent conference, you're to use their original name, but back in class, you're supposed to use their preferred pronoun and name, right? This is what the schools were arguing. And so we tried to introduce a bill to make that illegal. We got all kinds of pushback. And then we got school districts. We got 10 different school districts in California to introduce their own policies that said, hey, if a kid decides to make an official change to the records about their pronouns and their name, parents have to be just notified. Not like they have to get permission, notified, no matter what age they are. And there was lawsuits filed, and so there's a big federal lawsuit that's ongoing that we are probably going to win, and I can tell you about that.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I want to hear about what lawsuits have been filed in
Sure.
response to Governor Newsom signing a lot of these into law, and some of the things that you're seeing that you do believe aggress against parental rights, civil liberties. And things that are just plain unconstitutional. What's happening on that front?
Well, there's all kinds of stuff, but let me just start with the secret transitioning policies that many school districts have, where kids are secretly transitioned. They get particular forms, a transitioning document they fill out, and they write on there who's supposed to know and who isn't supposed to know, and then the teachers keep that document secret from the parents. So there were two, and I'm holding up here a recent decision. There's a federal case down in, I believe it's Escondido, down in the San Diego School District, where there were two teachers who were in junior high, and they were being told the policy is that if you have a transitioning kid in your class, you must keep that secret from the parents. These were two Christian teachers, and they said, our faith does not allow us to lie or to parents, and so we want a religious accommodation. We can't follow this particular law, and we will not be referring to children based on their chosen gender identity. Our religious beliefs won't let us do that. We believe that sex is something determined by biology, and so we can't refer to a boy as a girl just because they want to. So we need some kind of religious accommodation. The school initially refused, and so they filed a federal lawsuit violating their religious liberty, and they won. The judge, Roger Benitez, he decided in their favor, like an initial decision in their favor last year. But then the attorneys wanted that same case to apply not just to a couple teachers. They wanted this decision to apply to every school district, every parent, every teacher in the state. And so they got permission just a couple weeks ago to make this a class action lawsuit. So we expect next month the judge to make his final decision to confirm what he decided already, that parents have the ultimate right to decide the upbringing and care of their own children, meaning a school is not allowed to transition a kid without parental consent or knowledge. And so that's going to knock down all these privacy policies. It's going to make them all illegal, and it's going to let any parent sue a school if their child has been secretly transitioned, And so that's going to be huge. Mm-hmm. And so it's one way we're pushing back.
Well, that's really good to hear. I mean, it's just so illogical. But what we have noticed, and I do a lot of work with Brad Dacus and Pacific Justice Institute. I know you know them well, and we love them. They're like you guys. They're on the forefront of this fight, and it's just a theme that has emerged over the last few years of almost every single piece of legislation, not every single one, but a whole crop of them that have to do with schools, school-age children, minors, parents, parental rights. they all seem to be under this umbrella theme of separating parents from children, removing parental rights, funneling the kids through the state, through this education system, and really driving that wedge. And it's so highly concerning. I want to touch back on AB 495 just quickly. Are there lawsuits being filed in opposition to that?
They have not been yet. You have to look for a plaintiff, and so somebody who's been harmed by the bill. So that's part of the strategy. What we are doing with that bill is there are school districts who are going to put forth policies saying that they will not be accepting any caregiver authorization affidavits without parents signing them. They're under no obligation to do so, even though the state law says so. Ultimately, every state law is under the authority of the federal Constitution. So any law that's passed in California that does not listen or adhere to the parental rights that have been established by precedent of the Supreme Court for hundreds of years, those aren't laws that are legal. And so this particular law that was passed about the caregiver auth, this is an illegal law. This is illegal. So we do not have to obey it legally. And so school districts are going to be pushing back in that way. And if they want to come sue those school districts, great, because they're going to lose, right? And also, we're going to put together we're working on this, like an opt-out form, so that parents can fill this out and simply tell schools, do not listen. Here are the people on my list of caregivers that I authorize to pick up my child from school or make any decisions for them, and no one else. I don't care if they bring a caregiver authorization form. These are the only people I accept. And so that's another strategy. But ultimately, this law is going to be knocked down as unconstitutional. And so the thing is, you have to find somebody who's been harmed or potentially just about to be harmed.
Which is unfortunate that, you have to first wait for that to happen. But you're absolutely right. And, every school, now, from my understanding, Greg, this affects public schools as well as private schools. And anybody can bring a caregiver authorization into any school type setting. Is that right? And try to assume those medical and educational rights.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So you're spot on. This is what I've been hearing also, is that every school needs to have that list updated with parents and legal guardians of who's on the list. You got to get on the list.
Right.
But that's good. Well,
when I was trying to just understand how it would work in practice, and I talked to one school district, and they said, we already, before we let somebody enroll in our school, we require they give us a list of emergency contacts as a condition for enrollment. But so that's already in many school districts already in place. But they also forwarded me some legal advice that the California School Board Association, which is a nonprofit that helps schools follow California law, and most school districts belong to this association. They sent out some legal advice last year that said that when somebody shows up to pick up a child that isn't the parent, they either have to be on this list of emergency contacts, or they have a caregiver authorization affidavit. Okay. So this caregiver authorization affidavit is supposed to have the same authority as the list of contacts the parent have set up, that is the huge problem. That is so scary, because the thing that worries me almost most about this is that the authority that the affidavit is supposed to carry. What's a school supposed to do? Somebody shows up, they've got this form, they say, this is the end-all, be-all legal authority. A school's not going to call the police. If someone's there physically, putting a child into their car, waving the affidavit saying, this trumps anything else you can do, that's the scary moment and the concerning moment in which, schools need to be prepared. I always believe that schools should have some type of security, no matter what type of school you are or where you are. That's just the day and age that we live in. Right.
But the intention of this, when used with ill intent, is just to get your hands on a kid, because it puts everybody, including the legal system and the courts and the school and the parents, on the back foot of having to track down. And once a kid's gone for ill intent, I mean, that's really nearly impossible. So parents, legal guardians need to really have their antennae up on this one and make sure that your school knows about AB 495. It is law now until it gets challenged and overturned. And sadly, we have to wait for something not so great to happen to do that. But everybody needs to make sure their school knows about this, and that they're very clear on who is allowed to pick up child, or take a child anywhere, or drop off, or have any contact with your child while at that school. Thanks for breaking that down for us, Greg. That's a really important one. You've just also, written quite a bit about this high school girls team who filed a federal lawsuit after 4 years of having a male on their volleyball team. What is going on with that situation?
Right. So, we've had this law for about 10 years where it was back, I believe, in 2012, where the law changed and said that students could participate in sex-segregated sports based not on their sex, their physical sex, but based on their gender identity. And how do you know someone's gender identity? Well, you don't know independently. You simply have to ask the kid, like, how do you identify? And so, which means that any kid can simply, if he's not comfortable with his own sex, he can decide he wants to play on the other sports team. It's not just sports team, it's bathrooms, it's showers, it's locker rooms. So there was a huge push back when this was first implemented. There was a recall petition. There was an organization that we work with, gathering signatures, Capital Resource Institute. They got really close to gathering enough signatures, and then a huge chunk of them were declared, not official, and so they didn't clear whatever number they needed to get the thing on the ballot, and so it died. And so I think the public was like, well, how many kids out there are identifying as trans? Like, there's so few. It's just, let's just let them do it. Like, who's it going to affect? Well, that was before they were teaching right down to kindergarten that the sex is something everybody gets to pick. And so the more they've been implementing that teaching into the schools, it's not unsurprising that more and more kids think they might be some other sex than the sex they always thought they were, right? They don't quite fit in to whatever stereotype they think male or female is at their school, and then they don't get accepted by that particular sex, and they think, I must be a different sex, right? And if I'm a different sex, all of a sudden the school district labels you a wonderful hero, an authentic person, right? And everybody is not allowed to object, right? They must affirm. Like, even your parents aren't allowed to object.
Right, or then CPS does come and takes your kid out of your home.
Threatens that you're in a harmful, dangerous home, right? And that's so what we're finding out is, I'm not sure what set it off. Maybe it was Riley Gaines, who is a national swimmer who objected to when she lost a swimming match to this 6'4" guy who previously was a mediocre swimmer and decided he was a woman. And they all had the sports team had to endure him undressing in front of them, him watching them undress, and then competing against them in swimming meets. And he was winning when he was never winning as a male, right? So it became, and then more and more schools, everybody started, there was more and more kids started wanting to play on the opposite sex teams. And so here's an instance in Europa. This young man, A.B. Hernandez, started identifying as a girl. He joined the volleyball team and the track team. And he was all over the news
Mm-hmm.
in the spring because he ended up winning 3 state contests as a girl, and then but he's also on the volleyball team. And so this particular lawsuit is involving several students, a couple Catholics and a Muslim girl who were upset that they had to endure a male in their locker room who and they were experiencing sexual harassment.
Mm.
He would slap them on the butt. Um, and these are very conservative girls, and they did not appreciate that. And they complained, and they were told they had the problem,
Wow.
right? And so they filed a federal complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Advocates for Faith and Freedom, which is another Christian legal firm, who is, filed a civil rights complaint against them, saying that they violated Title IX. Right? Title IX is the federal law that makes sure that girls have equal opportunity in sports with males. Right? And the whole thing is how are girls going to have equal sports with males if the males can play on their team?
Well, it's such an obvious issue, too. You don't see women transitioning to men to play in men's sports.
Yeah, why is
And,
that?
well,
Why is
I'm
that?
blown away by it. Here's the thing. A.B. Hernandez, I could not believe my eyes when I saw him pop up on a volleyball team again. And you make a good point. What does it matter if it's just a couple of these, trans kids, these boys who are say they're transitioning and say they're girls and are playing on sports? This grows and this builds, and A.B. Hernandez is a perfect example. We watched him just absolutely smoke every girl on that, that track, on track teams, and just obliterate them while his mother went to social media to shame everyone for saying anything negative about her poor son, who was the victim, clearly. And I thought that had been sorted. It died down for a little bit. And here I see a story now about a boy playing on the girls' volleyball teams. And I looked at this kid and I thought, gee, that sure looks a whole lot like A.B. Hernandez. That was him again. So of course he's going to join every single girls' team he can and dominate. This isn't going in a good direction should we let it continue on and we don't confront it. Girls are losing opportunities. They're just giving up. And it just, so flies in the face of this entire movement of feminism and making sure girls do have as many opportunities as the boys have. And just because you're a boy whose athletic ability cannot cut it with the other boys doesn't mean you have the right to come and start stealing those opportunities and those records and those medals from the girls because you're built differently and you are. So it drives me crazy. I couldn't believe that I kept seeing this kid pop up over and over and again. But I'm really glad that there's a lawsuit filed. It needs to stop. It's completely unfair. It's inequitable. And I'm glad that you guys are helping there. Greg, I just want to get to Prop 50 while I've got a few minutes left with you. Now, this is coming up next week on the ballot. It's coming really quickly.
Right.
But the ballot turnout's low. I think Californians are struggling with the overwhelming feeling that their vote doesn't matter. And Prop 50 is this great example of how it's about to matter less, right? And so if there was ever a time that we needed more people to vote and engage in their civic duty and take advantage of that right that we are given as adults here and citizens, it's now. So give us a quick rundown of what's going on with Prop 50 and why it's so important to vote.
Yeah, no. This is in regards to congressional districts.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not going to affect the state legislators at all. So every 10 years we do a big census and we add up how many people live where, and then based on those numbers they draw up the lines. So like in California, you want to make sure you have 40 districts for senators. And so as the population decreases or increases or moves around, you got to make sure the lines are all, drawn so you get the more or less the same amount in every district. So, but for whatever reason, Texas had to. There's some lawsuits out there regarding how previous lines have been drawn. If they have been drawn in a way that violates civil rights, whether they've been drawn using race as a criteria for drawing, that would be illegal. You're not supposed to use race as a criteria for drawing districts. You're supposed to draw them so that people in areas have similar issues. Like, you don't want to put someone out in the desert, and combine them in with city living, or somebody who's living in the mountains, and tie them into a coastal region.
Which is particularly applicable here in California, right? Because we have such a massive state, so many different industries, so many different types of communities. The issues are vast here. We're not like Rhode Island. You have to really be careful how they're drawn fairly and equitably here, particularly.
Right. And typically the legislators or any political party in power wants to draw the lines to maximize the number of their party getting in, right? And they use something called gerrymandering. They'll find out where their voters are, and they'll draw a district to scoop in just enough of those voters so that they win every time. So here in California, so Texas started doing something similar, right? And so California, in reaction, said, well, because here in California, the legislators do not draw the lines. We have an independent commission every 10 years that's pulled together, and they come up with the lines that are eventually established. That's in our Constitution. So Prop 50 is, was pushed by Newsom. This is an emergency. Texas is redrawing the lines so that they get more Republicans. We need to do the same thing to make sure there's more Democrats. And so they gerrymandered the heck out of the remaining map to get rid of like 4 or 5 more Republicans.
Which weren't represented fairly to begin with. If we're going to do any redistricting, it should be going the other direction. But really, what people are claiming that California has to do it to even things out because of what Texas did, that's not really correct. I mean, Texas was sued. Well, Galveston County, Texas was sued by Biden's DOJ, saying, hey, you need to make more of those minority-majority districts. You need to put more brown and black people together. And they did. They did it. They drew them differently. And California's done that in the past, too. So Texas does it, and then a higher court says, hey, wait a minute, that's actually unconstitutional. So Trump gets into office, this second administration, and his DOJ says, hey, Galveston, don't forget, those majority or minority drawn districts are unconstitutional. You need to fix it. So they did, and it did lead to more red leaning districts. And so California and the people who think that you should vote yes on Prop 50 to absolutely remove any of our independent redistricting and our voice and our neutrality there are just pointing over at Texas saying, well, Trump told them to do it. Trump told them to get more, Republican seats in Congress, and that's not the full picture. It's not the full story. So this can't simply be an apples to apples reaction to what Texas did without looking at the full picture and understanding. They're following the law per a higher court that said, hey, you can't do that. And what's happening here is really concerning because if we're truly going to redistrict, the first thing that should be on the ballot is, hey, California voters, give us the authority to redraw the maps, but they already redrew those maps. And then they're trying to temporarily, and I use my little air quotes because that's a joke, right? Temporarily remove the independent redistricting commission, which the people voted for 2 separate times. And so it's all very concerning. There's a huge push to confuse people, and now we've got former President Obama in there saying, "Hey, do you want to preserve democracy and preserve independent districting?" And it's like, well, I'm not going to be preserving independent redistricting by removing the Independent Redistricting Commission, sir.
Right.
Thank you. It's so backwards. It's so concerning. I guess what my real question for you is, let's say Prop 50 passes. They're really working hard to pass it, to confuse voters, to suppress the vote. The ballot returns are pathetic. I think people in California have really thrown their hands up. They're exhausted. We're tired, right? This is like a daily assault against California citizens. Let's say it passes. what's the best reaction that we can have to that? What can we do at that point should this go into effect?
Well, I'm sure there'll be a lawsuit, right? But we can't depend. I think if you're going to remain in California, you got to be and you're conservative and go, what do I do? Well, I know no one wants to have to worry about politics. You just rather raise your kid, just, go to church. Just leave me alone. Generally, I mean, make sure the laws are enforced to keep crime at bay. But we don't want to have to worry about politics so much. Well, folks, that's what has got us into this mess. Mm-hmm. The other side is very, very active in politics, and now they're using their power to punish the side that they don't agree with. And so we're going to have to re-engage ourselves for the long term, right? You're going to have to re-engage yourself, whether it's in your local city council, your local school boards, right? It's got to be a thing that, more people engage themselves in it, because they would love for you to get exhausted and throw up your hands and run to another state, right? Or, isolate yourself and just hunker down and I don't want to think about it. There are terrible consequences to that. And so if you're going to stay here, learn to stand up for yourself, learn to stand up for liberty, find ways to educate your own kids. Don't just become passive and not do anything.
Yeah, excellent advice. I think that is so what we want to do. I want to stick my head in the sand sometimes, and I love politics and I love being engaged. So I know if I'm getting overwhelmed, everyone else must be exhausted from it too. So I appreciate that, motivation and encouragement to be civically minded, to make sure that, what your kids are being taught is accurate. Make sure their school is safe and that you've updated that emergency contact form. And if your school doesn't have that, then make sure you're following Greg and the California Family Council. And where can people find you? Give us your website again, Greg.
Yeah, it's californiafamily.org. Mm-hmm. And we are all over Facebook and Instagram and YouTube, and we're constantly putting out content. We got a newsletter that comes out every week where I'm writing articles about all this stuff and keeping everybody updated. And so that's one way we try and inform folks. You can't always rely on your local press to cover this stuff in detail, and it gets confusing. So we try and we'll try and deconfuse you.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. I'd like to be deconfused.
That's a word.
I don't know, actually. Well, I appreciate that. And, for anybody who just doesn't know where to start, they're feeling that urge. They're feeling like, okay, I hear you. I need to be paying more attention. I would just encourage you to make sure you're following the California Family Council on socials. Go to their website. They have great resources, brilliant articles and writing on that, californiafamily.org. And then I'll keep up too, and I'm breaking it down for you guys, so make sure you're following along here as well. But Greg, thanks for coming on the show today and helping us just understand what is going on a little bit better. It is confusing, and thank you for deconfusing a lot of us today. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic, where we break down the basics of all political issues and let you decide. Be sure to follow us at politicallybasic.com and at politicallybasic on all socials so you don't miss a single episode. We will see you next time.